Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with the October 2017 Love from Lizi kit. This was a Halloween kit and I have shared my unboxing video, and this is actually my second attempt to record the voiceover. I'm working with a new microphone as of late, and the first time I did the recording I didn't quite have all the settings right, and it was very difficult to hear, so I'm hoping that this recording is going to be a bit better. To get started, one of the first things that I had inspiration to do with the kit was to make one of these mummy cards, and I've seen these before. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm coming up with the idea, but the gauze in the kit I thought would look good wrapped around the ivory cardstock to create the look of a large mummy. And a lot of times when I see these mummy cards, I see them with googly eyes, and I thought, well, or wiggle eyes, and I thought since the kit included those, it'd be a fun way to use two features of the kit. The wiggle eyes that I wound up using on the card are actually a little bit larger than the ones I found in the kit because I didn't really check for scale, and I was kind of in a hurry when I was working on this kit in general. And that might sound kind of silly because I was late with this video, but again, I did have to re-record everything, or re-record the voiceover, as well as we've just been going through some transitions as of late. And but everything is settled now, and so hopefully my next video, as the November kit is being already revealed and there's some sneak peeks for that, that will be up in a much more timely manner. So there was actually a little speck on one of the eyeballs that I received in the kit, and so I was trying to clean it off there, but you can see the size of the eyeballs from the kit, and then the ones that I chose that were a little bit larger. So I think if you wanted to use the ones from the kit, I would just make this panel smaller and then back it on something else, and that would look great too. But I'm just going to fold all that over and attach it to a card base and create a really simple card. All the card pictures, the still pictures, will be available on my blog. So if you want to see more details on how it was done, I do, trim things for time here on YouTube. And the next card that I wanted to create, I wanted to use the spider webs from the card kit, and I wanted to try to use a variety of things from the card kit, mix it up, and give you some ideas. And I also was trying to think of fun texture for the cards as well, because I think that that was one thing that this card kit offered, is a lot of opportunity to add, texture to the card bases. So I'm just basically wrapping the spider web around a piece of black cardstock, and I'm using my ATG gun adhesive for most everything today because I find that it's a really strong adhesive and was able to hold up to these less conventional materials. So once all of that is wrapped around, I want to attach the plastic spiders from the kit, and they have a little hook on the back of them, but I wasn't sure if that would really hold them onto the card, especially if they were put in a package. So I decided to add a little bit of extra adhesive. In the case of the extra adhesive, I went with glue dots just because even though the ATG is strong, it's more inclined for flat things, and this is a, of course, 3D plastic spider. So the glue dot, you can kind of ball it up and wrap it around the surface, and so I kind of like put it in a little glue ball and then stuck that on the back of the spider so that that would add a little bit extra layer of something to keep it secure there. And then I'm going to put that on the orange card base so it pops up a bit, and I'm ready to move on to my next card. This would be traditionally a 10 cards, 1 kit video, but I am going to show one treat idea, so it's more of a 10 projects, 1 kit video. And I did find adding the adhesive to the card base worked better just because those spiders made the card front a little bit lumpy. Next up, I wanted to start using some of the images from the stamp set. This card kit is definitely more of a spooky card kit, spooky Halloween rather than a cutesy Halloween. And I probably tend more towards cutesy just because of my personal style and because of the kind of cards I make. As many of you know, I donate most of my cards to Cards for Hospitalized Kids, and to other charitable organizations. And so with that in mind, I do try to keep things probably a little bit more fun or light. And I try to think carefully about how I could adapt these card kit contents to that purpose. The more spooky, macabre side, or sort of Halloween, is generally avoided in those cards. So I thought of other ways of using it to make it a little bit less spooky and a little bit more fun. So I liked the hand with the high five sentiment. I thought that that could work well, and maybe it would be a card like a Halloween-ish theme, but it's not too Halloween-y, and it would be perfect maybe for some of the older kids. I also noticed in the stamp set it didn't have a explicitly Halloween sentiment, which, listening to Lizzie's video, seemed pretty intentional. I mean, a lot of us do have those Halloween sentiments. You know, you probably already have a stamp or 2 or 5 that say Happy Halloween, so no reason to have another one per se. And then instead she focused in on a lot of these really fun punny sentiments, and so I'm going to try to take advantage of those with the card making process today. I am pairing this panel, which I used VersaFine ink to stamp the skeleton hand all along the edges of the cream cardstock, and then I'm going to put it on some of the pattern paper. I did want to add a bit of a layer in between just because I thought there could be a little bit more interest to the card. So basically I'm going to take a strip of black cardstock from the kit, and I am going to cut it like a little banner for, just like a banner edge there, attach that, and then layer the skeleton hand panel on top. With the card kit cardstocks, I like to create some of them as card bases, but I also like to save a lot of the solid cardstock. So I usually make one card base and then take the rest of the solid paper and use it in a variety of other ways on my creations. That way I have some solid pieces to layer with the patterns. Next up, I am going to work with the embossing powder from the kit. There is an orange glitter embossing powder. I wasn't sure if I stamped and embossed with it how noticeable it would be on this orange cardstock, because it would be a very tone-on-tone thing, but that was pretty much my intention, is for it to not be too dominating, because, you know, obviously bones aren't traditionally orange, so I thought it would make a little bit more sense if it was for a tone-on-tone texture sort of look, so I decided to use it in that way. I wanted to cover the whole panel except for the small area with the sentiment to create sort of a patterned paper of sorts, and therefore I stamped a bit of it with the Versamark, and I stopped to add the embossing powder. If you were to stamp the whole panel with Versamark and not, then some of the Versamark might dry before you finish all of your stamping, and then the embossing powder won't stick to it. So I recommend just kind of stopping in between, adding a little bit of the embossing powder, and then keep going. I have a piece of typing paper underneath my where I'm working right now, so that once I have dumped the embossing powder onto it, I can put it onto the typing paper, and then I can filter all of that embossing powder back into the jar, and none of it is wasted. Then I will heat this up, and as I suspected, it was a little bit hard to see the bones, the detail of the bones. So I'm gonna decide to add some more of the bone image, and this time I'm going to stamp it in black so it's a little bit more prominent and kind of adds to the design. I do like the tone-on-tone textured look that was created with the embossing powder, but I just want to make sure, since I am using that punny sentiment, "You are so humorous," it is clear that, you know, those are the bones, the humorous bones that go with it, to make it make sense. So I'll just fill in some of the area with these stamped bones here. I really like using VersaFine ink for stamping sentiments and for stamping anything with detail. The only reason I wouldn't use VersaFine is if I was going to do some Copic coloring. because the VersaFine will smear with the Copic markers. It's more of an oil-based pigment type ink, and so it doesn't work well with them. However, it does tend to provide really crisp, clear images. And with this particular stamp set, there is a lot of really nice fine detail. So I'm going to put this panel again onto some of the pattern paper. I tended towards using some of the pattern paper that wasn't explicitly Halloween for these cards, just because these cards aren't necessarily explicitly Halloween. So I figured that way they would be a little bit more versatile and perhaps more useful. So I am going to also add a little bit of extra detail with a strip of black cardstock and a bit of this orange ribbon from the kit. There was some orange satin ribbon and some orange black ribbon. Sorry, some satin black ribbon. Again, I am sorry if my voiceover is not up to its usual quality. As you probably can tell, I have a bit of a cold here, and it's the second time I'm recording it. So, just going through it all again, I'm trying to remember, like, what do I really want to share, and what did I don't know. It's just a little bit trickier recording it a second time through, but I hope that you still find the ideas enjoyable, and I apologize for the roughness of my voice. Next up, I wanted to work with some of the vellum from the kit. I really liked the particular piece of vellum that looked like a moon with bats flying around it. And I also wanted to take that opportunity to create a shaker card because I thought it would be fun if there were some sequins coming behind the moon. So I decided to add a bit of cardstock behind the vellum piece, and I covered the entire piece of cardstock with adhesive, and to make sure the moon was still see-through and had that sort of vellum semi-translucent quality, I cut a hole in the brown cardstock about the size of the moon, and that allows it to create a fun shaker look, but I have to trim off all of that adhesive. Then I added my doubled up foam tape around the edges, and I'm going to put some sequins down and then put that whole panel on top. Now, at the time that I recorded this, I did not have the Love from Lizi kit sequins, so I would of course recommend using those. I just was trying to get this video done for you guys at the time, and so I used some sequins from my stash, but the kit sequins would look perfect here, and that's what I would ordinarily recommend. And I thought putting it on that yellow card base there was perfect because it would look kind of like a yellow moon. I also really liked the piece of owl vellum. I really love owls, so I kind of felt like, I have to use it, and I'm gonna later on in the video also use the other owl image from the kit. But there really wasn't a sentiment that paired up well with the owl from the kit because they were all those sort of like punny sentiments that matched the skeleton. So I also looked around at the vellum and saw this Halloween. And in the stamp set, there's a stamp that says hooray. And so I thought, well, hooray Halloween would be perfect. So I am going to cover that piece of vellum that says the word Halloween completely with adhesive and then trim around it, leaving a little bit of a border. And I can layer the one piece of vellum on top of the other and therefore get a look of a sentiment on top. And it will also give me an area to add some extra adhesive, because if you cover an area completely with adhesive with vellum, it's, you can of course see the adhesive, but since it's covering everything evenly, it doesn't look odd, like if you just had a little square of adhesive in the corner. So I'll peel that back. I like the Elizabeth Crafts tape for this because that's what I have, but I know that Lizi recommends the Xyron machine for the vellum, and I've had one in the past and know that it will work well for that purpose. So again, I'm going to stamp the hooray. I'm going to stamp that with StazOn jet black ink because that will dry on vellum. StazOn is perfect for non-porous surfaces, including vellum. However, if you don't have StazOn, you could use the VersaFine Onyx Black ink that I was using in other parts of the video and just use some clear embossing powder over it, and then it will dry permanently. As I add the adhesive, I added it behind that black strip there because that is opaque and you won't be able to see adhesive behind it. And then I wanted to be able to tack down the corners a bit. So I decided that I would take that little corner detail from that piece of vellum that I'd already cut out, and I would again cover it completely in adhesive, because if you cover it completely, that's a good way to kind of have that work around with vellum. And I would sort of fussy cut it out. It would kind of serve two purposes. Right now, that corner of the card looks a little empty anyway. I think I would like it if it was tacked down, but this kind of adds that dual purpose of tacking it down, adding adhesive, but also filling that corner and adding a little bit more detail and interest to the card. And that is some of the shimmery yellow or gold cardstock from the card kit, and I'll add that to a white card base. I like the look of the shimmer cardstock, even as just simple edges around it. I think it's really pretty and adds a little extra something to a card. Next up, I wanted to create a little treat. I thought that the card kit had those really fun, look like bottle labels essentially, and this one says owl eyeballs, and it does say pure concentrated extract of owl eyeballs, so it's not really supposed to be like eyeballs in there. But I thought, well, the M&Ms kind of looked like like eyeballs. Obviously, for most owls, those would be way too small. But anyway, that was kind of my thought process there. So I put them in that like candy wrapper tube, but I think that you could put them in a small Ziploc bag or any other sort of cellophane bag. You get those for like the jewelry department of craft stores or in the baking department, and you can get a variety of sizes. I decided to create a little like tube here to hold down the M&Ms, and if I were instead just putting them in a baggie, honestly, you could just add a little bit of adhesive to the back of the owl tag or the labels there and then just call it a day. But because there's not a lot of surface area to the tube, I am instead creating this little wraparound. And I did it by scoring at 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 2 inches, 2.5, and 3, and then folded it around my tube of M&Ms, added some adhesive, and just sort of stuck that down, and that was about it. Then I'm going to take this as a good opportunity to use some of the fun ribbon from the kit. I also added a little bit of removable adhesive to make sure that the tube of M&Ms didn't just fall right through, and I put that on the inside of that black tube that I created. So here I was going to use the twine and one of the other ribbons, and I punched a small hole at the top because there's the writing at the top and I didn't want to punch a hole through the writing, so I wound up using my smaller hole punch and found that my second ribbon wouldn't go through it, but I found a workaround. So I'm first just going to add the black and white simple twine, and I will feed the two ends through and then kind of create a knot that is easily undone. And I wanted to add the orange too for just a little bit more interest. However, I found the hole that I created to be too small. So I'm just going to put the twine through the hole, and then I'm going to add the orange with my Tim Holtz tiny attacher, which is basically just mini staples. So I put the two ends through, and then I took the two ends and fed it through the loop that was created, so it would stay on without being a tied knot. And then I just folded over the orange ribbon and just folded it in half and added a little staple there. And I did have a bit of a trouble with my tiny attacher, and I cut that film out so you didn't have to watch me struggle with a tiny attacher, because you just staple it and you guys know how to do that. So next up, I wanted to continue to work with different interesting elements of the kit, and one of the interesting things that was included was this black mesh. So similar to how I did with a spider web, I'm going to wrap it around. This time I'm going to wrap it around some orange cardstock for a really high contrast look. So I cut it to be slightly larger. I glued down the long ends, and then before I glue down the short ends, I am going to trim the corners into a bit of like the side of a triangle look. And this kind of reminds me of like wrapping a present, where you can sometimes fold down the sides to create a cleaner look. And that's essentially what I'm doing, but instead of just folding them over, I am cutting them off. And then I will continue to add my super sticky ATG gun adhesive, and that will secure all of this down. Then I can work on what else I want to add to the panel. So just tucking those sides over, and I'll be honest with you right now, I forget what I'm about to do next, so I'm a little bit stalling for time here. I believe I'm going to try to pull in some more of the pattern paper. I thought briefly about adding that vellum piece, but because I'd already covered part of it with adhesive, I wasn't quite sure that was going to work. So I'm going to bring it to my pattern paper here. I'm going to kind of flip through and see which pattern paper do I think it pairs well with. And I like to just, like, you know, if I have a colored panel or I have something I've created, just sort of hold it up to a couple different pattern papers and sort of test it against it. I also knew that I wanted to try to work with some things in the card kit that I hadn't used yet, and one of the things that I hadn't used yet was the washi tape. So I am going to incorporate that on this card. I cut the spiderweb pattern paper down to just under a standard size card, standard A2 size card. I'm going to add the orange panel on top of it, and then I'm ready to add my washi. Now, the washi tape does not stick to the black mesh. However, it does stick to the regular pattern paper, unsurprisingly. So I am just going to make a point to make it longer than the pattern paper and just tuck it under so that I know it will stick, even though it's, you know, it's tacking to the mesh, but it's not really going to stay down. I don't think you could just stick it only on the mesh and make it work. Next up, I'm coming back to the idea of the high five sentiment and stamp, and I'm going to stamp that on the ivory cardstock, again with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, because it is a, you know, like I said before, a great sentiment ink. I am going to fussy cut out the skeleton hand. And you will want to make sure when you are using VersaFine ink that you do give it a chance to dry before trying to fussy cut it, because it will smear. It is, like I said, more of a pigment ink. So what I decided to do was to prevent that by clear embossing it. And if you clear emboss it, you'll know that it's dry and you won't have to worry about that. However, if you ever do smear your VersaFine ink, you can use the Tombow sand eraser, and it works pretty well because, again, it works better with pigment inks. It also really works well with the Distress Oxide inks because they're pigment based. So I will just take my heat gun to that and emboss the sentiment, and that way when I fussy cut it out, it's not going to be a problem. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a border around them because it's not something you could typically fussy cut right on the edge. And I will adhere them using the washi tape to create like sort of a clear grounding line. I'll tuck the hand under the washi tape and then cut the banner sides of the sentiment and stick that on top. And that's going to be another simple card finished. I am nearing the end of my 10 projects. I did decide to go with a darker cardstock. I didn't like the white there because I had used ivory, and so I'm going to adhere it to a brown, even though there's actually no brown there. Maybe a black card base would have been better if you had one on hand. So I'm going to return back to the vellum because I liked this frame piece that was included, so I decided to use the high five sentiment again. And this time I wanted to take advantage of the vellum, and the vellum would allow me to do a reverse stamping technique in some ways. Like, like mirror stamping, where you can make the mirror image, because I could stamp on the back or the front of the vellum and it wouldn't look like, yeah, because it's, the vellum see-through, it will work. And I'm using Stays-On ink. I did find that I didn't always get a perfect impression. However, luckily, because it's Halloween and the just general look of the kit, I think that it works out, that they wouldn't be perfect. It kind of just gives them a bit of a distressed look, which is fine. And here I kind of wish I had planned ahead a little bit more so that I would have only stamped 3 hands. I kind of feel like it looks a little crowded with the 5 hands that I eventually put on it, but unfortunately I didn't plan ahead enough, and I think that with Stays-On ink, you probably could have actually taken some alcohol and wiped it off and started over again, but I really didn't want to risk that, for one, because I was trying to work a little bit quickly, and also because if I ruined the piece of vellum, then I would have to come up with a whole new card idea. So I wound up stamping 5, and 5 because things generally look good in odds. Sometimes when they're sort of in sets of evens, it just looks like something is missing, or it looks too orderly, and I kind of prefer, I guess, a little bit more of a whimsical, random sort of look. I also thought that vellum would be a good opportunity to use this black mesh again, because you would be able to see the black mesh through the vellum, and it would look interesting because it would look a little bit different under the orange and different under the clear part where I stamped the sentiment, but also would be completely blocked out in those black areas, and it would just, again, add a interesting layer. Not so much, I guess, a texture in this case, because you wouldn't be able to feel it through the vellum, but just something interesting. Like, Lizi includes all of these wonderful, unusual things. It's not just cardstocks and paper and stamps. There's, really different things that you might not initially pick out for your card making. And I enjoy that. I think it makes it an interesting challenge, and it gives you a fun, unique look to your projects. So I'm going to add a bit more adhesive. I'm going to keep the adhesive under those solid opaque black parts of the vellum so that you don't see any of the adhesive layered down, and also because I found that trying to add the adhesive on top of that black mesh was a little bit tricky. And I'll put it on an A2 size card and then just trim it down to the size of that piece of vellum. So here we are, finally on the 10th card, and as I mentioned, I was working quickly, so I was probably at this point running out of ideas, but I wanted to still use some parts of the kit that I haven't used. Like, I hadn't used any of the purple metallic, I'm sorry, I just totally blanked on the name, but like the sticker strips that come in all the Love from Lizi kits. Peel-offs, I think that they're called. So I wanted to take advantage of that, and then I also thought, all this time and I haven't even white embossed any of the skeletons, and like that seems to me like kind of like the obvious thing to do to make them look white. So I thought I'll take the black shimmer cardstock, I'll white heat emboss another hand in the high 5 sentiment, since I felt like that was the one that worked out best for me. But there are a lot of other really, really fun and punny sentiments in the kit that I encourage you to take a look at and use, and you could recreate some of these cards with different sentiments instead if that worked better for you, or be inspired by some of these cards with, some variations. But I'm going to take the purple shiny peel-offs, I'm going to lay them across the black shimmer cardstock in sets of 2, but I'm going to make 3 sets of 2 because, again, odd groupings tend to look, more appealing to the eye. And I'm putting one all the way across the card, and then the second one I'm only putting part way across the card. And I'd like to pretend it's for some like really cool design reason, but it was mostly because once you put it across the card, the sort of 4-inch side of the card, you don't get enough left over to cover a card again completely across. So I thought, well, I don't want to, waste those bits of the peel off. So I decided to see how it looked, and I liked the look of it sort of ending halfway through on one of each of the sort of cross sets there. So I'm just going to add one last one here to the top. I am using some of the thicker peel offs from the card kit just because I wanted to make sure there was enough adhesive. They're thinner, obviously they have less adhesive, and I didn't know sometimes shimmer cardstock you need a little bit more adhesive to make things stick because it has a bit of a gloss to it. But I found that they stuck no problem, so then I'm going to again add this to a white card base to bring out the white from the embossing of the skeleton hand there, and then that is going to be my last project. I hope that you enjoyed this inspiration. I again apologize for my voice and the lateness of this video, but there will be a coordinating blog post where you can check out the cards, and I hope you enjoy this inspiration. You can follow the links in the video description to my blog, my channel, or to the Love from Lizi store, where you can sign up to purchase future kits and get some look at the November card kit that's coming that seems to have a sort of winter Christmas theme. And then I'll leave some video links for you to check out other videos. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day.